Yes, so it's 4 o'clock on December 3rd. This is the Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates will be conducted both in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public may watch the meeting through live real-time broadcast at www.youtube.com/user/Barnstable County. A public participation guide and meeting documents are available in advance at www.capecod.gov. County of Barnstable does not discriminate in the administration of its programs or activities on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other category protected by state and federal anti-discrimination laws and regulations. Reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. For more information or file a complaint, please contact Justina Marchak, Barnstable County ADA Non-Discrimination Coordinator at jmarczak@capecod.gov. Call 508-375-6646 or visit www.capecod.gov. Members of the public may also attend the meeting remotely through Microsoft Teams, and the link is available on that site.
Thank you very much. And now a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died in service to our country and those still serving in our armed forces. And now if we can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Clerk, if you don't mind calling the roll.
All right, Delegate Frederickson,
Here.
Delegate Frizel, Delegate Frizel? Yes, can we hear you? No. Can hear him though. Delegate Fuller.
Here.
Delegate Gallagher,
Here.
Delegate Green,
Here.
Delegate Harder,
Here.
Delegate Killian,
Here.
Delegate King,
Here.
Dean Omen,
Here.
Delegate O'Malley,
Here.
Delegate Sampson, Delegate Ty,
Here.
and Speaker Warner, Delegate Wyman Colombo, Deputy Speaker Gessen.
Here.
1 second to tally up. what I
Mr.
think we
Clerk?
have.
Mr. Clerk,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, my computer wasn't working when you called the roll. I'm here.
All right. Believe that's 12, representing 73.57% of the county's population.
Thank you very much. If we can get a motion to adopt the November 19 minutes.
So move.
Fantastic. Mr. Clerk, a roll.
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizel,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller. Yes. Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Delegate Green,
Yes.
Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Killian,
Yes.
Dean Omen,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson, Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Speaker Warner, Delegate Wyman Colombo, Deputy Speaker Gessen.
Yes.
Still 12, representing 73.57%.
Thank you. And now one more motion to adopt the order of business.
I move to adopt the order of business.
Second. Get a roll call.
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizel,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller. Yes. Delegate Gallagher.
Yes.
Delegate Green.
Yes.
Delegate Harder.
Yes.
Delegate Killian.
Yes.
Delegate King.
Yes.
Dean Omen.
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley.
Yes.
Delegate Sampson. Delegate Ty.
Yes.
Speaker Warner. Delegate Wyman Colombo. Deputy Speaker Gessen.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, that's 12, representing 73.57.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to move into the committee of the whole. We've got 3 big presentations in front of us today, and the goal is just going to be the opportunity in committee of the whole to get folks to ask questions that they have. as thoroughly as we can, since this is all we have on the agenda. So don't hesitate to ask questions, but also try to keep the questions short and allow the people to answer. Thank you. First, we've got public comment, if we have any. Now moving on to public hearing on proposed ordinance 25-14. Anybody from the public has come to comment on it? And with that, we're going to move on to communications from the regional commissioners, administrator, or directors. Administrator Dutton, if you've got anything you want to present.
Thank you, Speaker. I just want to give you an update on today's Commissioners meeting. It was a fairly relatively short meeting in terms of agenda items. They heard a presentation from the Barnstable County Health Department Tobacco Cessation Program. I think that's something that the health director is looking to change up a little bit, but the report was very positive. The numbers positive, but obviously more work to do, and looking at ways to redirect grant funding in ways that would be slightly more effective in new smoking environment. They heard a report from our lab director concerning Mass DEP's certification of the Barnstable County labs bacterial testing, specifically the IDEX Tecta system. We're the first in the state to be certified with this piece of equipment. And the benefit is that it gives us bacterial results basically in hours instead of days. So it has a significant impact for the beach testing program. And as everybody who goes to the beach knows, there are times when the beaches get shut down due to bacterial issues. And this will be able to test and retest in a much quicker fashion and get the beaches open, presumably open, if they are clear, much quicker than prior. The commissioners heard the FY27 capital budget presentation, and they also heard the ordinance. They also voted the ordinance that goes along with that. And then their consent agenda included a number of dredge contracts, shellfish seed supply, an amendment to the beekeepers contract for the use of property at the county farm, and a closeout of the AmeriCorps grant fund from last year. Specifically, and I will give you this little quick heads up on the capital items, because you'll be getting this presumably at your next meeting. But it's pretty, I used the word benign today, probably not the right word to use, but it amounts to a little over $1 million. It includes a vehicle, engineering for HVAC replacement at the Deeds and Probate Building, also engineering for a substantial electrical upgrade at Deeds and Probate, includes money for repair of the retaining wall along in front of the Superior Court building. It includes boiler replacement for the Superior Court. It includes planning for electrical upgrades for the Superior Court, and it includes upgrades to the finance and administrative offices in the Superior Court building. And so that is it for this FY27's capital requests. But I would draw your attention to when you get it, you'll see FY28's capital is out of this world, and quite frankly, not a sustainable request or need that we can fulfill. And most of it has to do with court, second district court, first district court, but you'll definitely see once you get your materials, you'll see the tidal wave that's coming over us in terms of capital needs. And it is substantial, a little bit scary, but I'll save all that fun for your next meeting. But that is it, but happy to answer any questions.
Taylor Goodman?
Yeah, that's sobering advice to wait for the 28th. But what about bonding for that? I mean, we have bonding ability, and our debt service is fairly low. I was wondering if there had been any discussion about that, or will there be discussion about that going forward, so that we can make some plans to meet those capital needs? And I know that many of them will be reimbursed eventually by the state.
So that's an excellent point, and yes, Carol's going to be giving you a pretty extensive update on our bonding capabilities. We don't have a lot of bonded indebtedness right now. We've got a fair amount that's been authorized and not borrowed yet, specifically Superior Court Building. When it comes to reimbursements, the state has in the past reimbursed us for capital expenses, the sizable expenses. We're a little nervous on, these sort of $18 million expenses and the years out that we have to bond. So if we go out and do a 10 or 15-year borrowing at that amount, given our relatively small operating budget, we're concerned about a number of things. One is cash flow. We've got to maintain a significant liquidity in order to maintain our cash flow. We also have to maintain our bond rating, and we don't want to be in a position where, even though we're getting reimbursed, we're borrowing over and above 10% of our operating budget, because that will sacrifice our bond rating and then end up sort of like a vicious circle, end up costing us more in terms of interest. So Carol's going to walk through that with you and explain, why this, why maintaining or pouring capital funds into the court buildings that we don't play any role in. We don't house any employees in these buildings. We don't do anything other than maintain them under the lease that we've got. So it's a bit of a challenge for us because it's going to involve us really having a lot of discussions with the state trial courts, with DCAM, and try to extricate ourselves from the capital, the obligation under our current lease to do the capital upgrades for these buildings. And I think there's a way to do that, but we've got about 18 months to have those conversations and come up with those plans. But when you get to your next meeting and beyond, certainly Carol will be showing you the numbers and the graphs and what the impact is if we do actually have to go ahead and borrow at that level. So. Yep.
Delegate Frizell?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Mr. Dutton, it sounds like Plan A isn't feasible, isn't sustainable. So are you and your team working on alternatives, Plan B and C, in order to get us through some of these capital needs?
Absolutely. Obviously, from our perspective.
I'm sorry, and will you be presenting some of those when you come before us with the capital request, or is it too soon?
It's probably too soon for the FY28 capital issues or challenges we have, but certainly once we get beyond our FY27 request, yes, you'll hear a lot from me on what our Plan A, probably through Plan Z is. But a lot of that does depend, quite frankly, on the willingness of the state to take over some of these capital projects and sort of free us from that obligation, even though we do get reimbursed for the most part.
Delegate Green?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess Halloween is over, but you're giving me nightmares. At least the material is ripe for nightmares. I mean, when you say the figures that you just said about bonding, I was very hopeful for the white elephant that we look out our window at for the development of that. It doesn't seem like that's even on the drawing board if we're talking about things of this nature. The other concern, I mean, as far as creative solutions are concerned, I hope you're thinking out of the box as well. And the other concern I had is about AmeriCorps. Is there any plan on the horizon as far as that's concerned?
In terms of capital needs, AmeriCorps does need some capital funding to take care of some of the properties. But we do have a plan for that. And I'm not too scared about AmeriCorps' capital needs at all. Obviously a little more concerned with having to maintain the court buildings. And that's a lot of money. And, it wouldn't be so bad if we were making something that was akin to a market rent on our space leases to the court system, the trial court. But we don't. The terms of the lease are terms that normally wouldn't be allowed in Massachusetts, but for the very specific law that authorizes these particular leases with the counties that maintain and own court buildings. So there's a lot of conversation to go on, I think, with the court system. There's a lot of conversation to go on with our state legislators, and certainly the administration, governor's administration, has to all be part of that conversation. Our buildings, we suffer to some extent from being really one of the most effective operations in the state. Don Reynolds and his crew do an exceptional job with the money that they do have maintaining the buildings that we have. So our court buildings, believe it or not, are actually in much better shape than a lot of the state court buildings. And on the one hand, that doesn't really help our cause. But on the other hand, we have developed what I think is a very good relationship with the trial court, the court administrator, and the chief judge. So I think we have a good enough relationship to have those conversations and be very honest about our challenges and what we need to do in the future. And I think that conversation will resonate with them. Whether and how that will end up in a resolution, I don't know yet.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful.
Doug Frederickson.
Good evening. I'll try to make it quick and easy. There was some discussion even brought before us to a commissioner at one of the hearings that there might be some discussion about increasing the deeds tax as possible revenue in the future. Is that accurate? And secondly, is there a cap on what the deeds tax can be?
There is a cap on what the deeds tax can be, and I think we're very sensitive internally, operationally. We're very sensitive to increasing anything at this point. There are a lot of sort of issues going on countywide, and I'm certainly very sensitive to pushing additional cost either to the registry of deeds, even though it's paid by property buyers. But I'm very sensitive to pushing additional costs onto either the towns or onto the registry and buyers. But to answer your question, there is a little bit of capacity there. If memory serves, I can't remember the percentages right off the top of my head, but there's something short of $1 million worth of capacity there, I guess is the best way to put it.
Any other questions? In that case, thank you, Mr. Dutton. One point of emphasis, though, on the court question, I think also just as a delegate, it doesn't make sense to me for the county to be maxing out our credit cards for the state renovations in the state courts. And I'm sure you and your staff are very capable and are going to be working through all the options with all the folks at the state level and the administration, the courts. But I do want to emphasize the importance of connecting with our delegation as well and making sure that they're looped in on this early, because as much as folks in the state are going to listen to you, they're going to listen to the senators and the reps a lot more once they get those calls. So if there's anything folks on the assembly can do to help make that connection, just as much as we can emphasize that. But best of luck.
Appreciate that.
And Delegate Harder now. Sorry, I got you caught.
Thank you. are you going to be here when we talk with Paul about I have a couple of things that you might be able to answer about the projects, the basement project. So in that case, we
I'll
can.
plan, yep, no, I plan to stay for a little bit, unless they're hard questions, in which case. No, I'll be here.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Rosalo to present the PFAS Fire Training Academy remediation.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. I'm Paul Rosala, Barnstable County Assets and Infrastructure Manager, and I'm joined with John Paquin from GZA. And he will be sharing our presentation. So John, if you want to pull that up. So we're here today to talk about the former municipal fire training facility and specifically about the PFAS release at the site and the ongoing remediation that's occurring at the site. So at first, I just wanted to. I've shown this slide a couple times. It's been updated as we progress with the site. It just gives a snapshot of what we have for ongoing contract settlements, fees, and essentially debt associated with the site. So the first two are associated with damages to the Mary Dunn wells owned by Hyannis Water, an entity of the town of Barnstable. So we have a settlement that and O&M fees that range out until 2037. We have a previous response coordinated with Mass DEP as far as the site capping. So essentially paving the site to prevent more rain and stormwater intrusion from mixing with the soil and picking up PFAS and spreading it through the aquifer. So another debt that goes out through to 2044. We have GZA, they're the licensed site professional, assisting us with remediating the site in accordance with the Massachusetts contingency plan, essentially the law governing the property owner for site cleanup. We have the permeable active barrier, which we'll be talking about today, roughly $2.5 million that was ARPA funding. So that project actually is complete as of October. So we'll be sharing, the details of the installation and where we go from here. We have a groundwater pump and treat system that's currently active at the site. So essentially pulling groundwater from a select location and extracting PFAS from it. There's a significant cost associated with the operation of that pump and treat system and oversight from the licensed site professional. That's all is required by the Massachusetts contingency plan. We have a budget that we carry for legal services and then a required Mass DEP permit fee. So that's essentially what we have ongoing right now. As far as just outlining the future, John, if you can go to the next slide for potential contract settlements, and this is essentially giving a vision what we have moving forward. So right now we're in our phase 2. It's essentially a site delineation where we're determining the nature and extent of our plume, and we'll get into detail on that in this presentation. How it's in some ways it's straightforward, but other ways it's very, very complex, and we're running into some very unique circumstances for our site. It's not like a typical gas station site where there's a leak in a gas tank and it just goes down a couple hundred feet south or whatever direction. We have a lot of complex factors. We have the airport with their own PFAS releases, some other potential mystery plumes as we've been deeming it, and how they all integrate with ours and who owns what. So we'll be covering that later on in the presentation. But once that phase 2 component is done, then we move on to the phase 3 and phase 4, essentially looking at what other remediation alternatives can you look at for your site. Where in our case, we have the permeable active barrier. We're, based on initial pilot testing that's shown to be successful. So we look forward with a positive vision as far as that's going to be a key element for how we manage our site down the road. But either way, the Mass contingency plan requires us to go through this process, and we've been tacking these big, construction numbers, 10 to 60 million. Again, carrying out the potential for the unknowns. But what we're hoping as we lock into this phase 2, that we'll have some significant cost savings on those numbers. But again, we're keeping them there just as a long-term placeholder vision and as far as what could happen. So the other, another X factor that could be positive to us would be a lawsuit with the PFAS manufacturers. So we have one for damages to property. We're second in line to the water systems that have been impacted. So I hear through the grapevine, some of the water providers are getting settlements or getting numbers. So I'm hoping we'll hear something relatively sooner, but this could be on a 6 month to a year magnitude. And unfortunately, the numbers that the water utility providers are getting are not nowhere near enough to really account for all the issues that they're having. The other piece I wanted to throw in there is with our permeable or active barrier, like any piece of equipment, it has a design life. We're hoping that, based on calculations, will be good out to 2045, essentially a 20-year period. But it would be prudent at some point to do some, budget planning where if, say, a particular hot spot of the barrier, gets, essentially the carbon gets used up by the PFAS traveling through, we'd have to replenish that carbon. So just long-term vision down the road, there could be additional expenses with that. I put that just as a placeholder there for the discussion point. At some point, we'll be doing, looking at new technology reviews. PFAS is still a relatively new contaminant, and we're hoping that there'll be some new alternatives in how to treat it and essentially remediate it long term. The one term that's been thrown around is trying to destroy the PFAS either in place or with some sort of injection. And I know some manufacturers, vendors are working on it. Right now, it's really cost prohibitive to use it, but perhaps maybe a decade from now we'll get something we can inject into the ground, and it'll be beneficial for us to take that approach to just essentially negate our PFAS liability. So that's another piece on there. We're looking for the future. Another piece we've talked about, if this cleanup process continues to incur costs, do we have discussions with past users? Do we look at trying to recover some of those costs? Again, this is just something that's been thrown out there. No decision has been made at all, but I think it's just important because it could impact potential settlements or potential options for the county. And then finally, additional liability settlements to others, where right now that's an unknown, but it could become a factor down the road potentially if new information's discovered. So from here, we can move on to the next slide. At this point, I'd like to introduce John Paquin, just to provide a technical update on the project, where we've been heading. We've made some good progress, and John can speak to everything that's being done out there and where we're heading.
Great, thank you. Yes, John Paquin, GZA. We've been working for you for about 1.5 years now, and I think we've made some good progress. And so I'll be walking you through that and let you know where we're going in the next year. I have to admit, I'm not really good about paying attention to hands up on these Teams calls. So if anyone has questions while I'm presenting, please, by all means, don't hesitate to chime in and ask the questions. We deal with it right away while I get the right slides up. I have no problem with that at all. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Paquin. We'll tackle the questions here. If folks want to raise their hand, just raise your hand, and we'll call on you as we go.
Great, thank you. So just, last time we spoke, we talked about our general approach, and I thought I'd just remind everyone about our approaches here. So the first thing, as Paul pointed out, is we have to comply with the Massachusetts Contingency Plan. And the goal of that plan is really to address the site as necessary to remove unacceptable risk. It's a risk-based program. And that's exactly what we're doing here, is we're looking at the extent of contamination, the levels of contamination, and are they adversely impacting any receptors? And those receptors are both ecological receptors and human health receptors. So that's our target here is we recognize we're probably not going to get rid of every molecule of PFAS out there, but what we want to do is to mitigate it such that we eliminate any significant risk. Okay, that's the whole point of the MCP, and it's a very prudent approach. Early on in the project, we recognize that this is a big project, as Paul has told you, and as I mentioned to you last time we spoke. It is a big project in a complicated area where we have your site, we have all these, 10 different municipal drinking water wells surrounding the site. We have the airport, we have multiple sources, we have the wastewater treatment plant. It's a complicated site, and we recognize that in order to do that, we had to look at it in a big holistic approach. First starting with, pulling together all the data we have. So we've done that. We've compiled all the data that's available. It's all in a central database, so now we can use it, and we've made that data available to others to use as well. And in that approach, we're working together as a team with the community, and that's been very productive and helpful. So we brought together members of the public. We've met, we have routine meetings with other community leaders, including the DEP, the USGS, town of Yarmouth, the airport, the town itself. We have anyone who wants to participate. Silent Spring it participates. It's good to get everyone's input as we move forward so that everyone knows what we're doing. We're being transparent, and we hear their concerns right away, and we can address them when we can right away. And that's been a very productive approach. So we're very happy with the approach, and people are responding very well on that. So with that said, I thought I mentioned that this is a complicated site. So I included this image just to remind people. I know you know the area better than anyone. You live there, but just to remind people of the layout of our land here. So up here is the fire training facility. It's on the eastern shore of Flint Rock Pond. Down here is Mary Dunn Pond. We've got a series of drinking water wells, municipal wells here called the Mary Dunn Wells. There's 4 of them, only 3 of which are online right now. Those are 1, 2, actually it's 1, 2, and 3. And they're pumping, and they pump at different schedules as needed. And that's significant. And then down here, we have another drinking water well. It's called the Airport 1 well. It is also part of the Hyannis Water District. It's used seasonally. It's not winter-proofed or winterized. So they can't run it during the winter months, but they don't need it during the winter months. They really run it during the tourist season when you need more water. Down here, we have the airport, and we have the airport infrastructure to the south of it here. And the airport has its own PFAS plume issues down here. And further down from that, further southeast of that, are the Mar wells, which are another set of drinking water wells operated by the Hyannis Water District. And so I just want to put that mental image in your mind, because we'll be talking about all these areas and these issues as we go forward. The other part beyond our area here is we've got the municipal wastewater treatment plant here, the Barnstable Water Pollution Control Facilities. Right here, you can see it. It's in this little triangular shaped piece of land here. And you can see each of these little square shaped infiltration beds. That's where after they treat the wastewater, they re-inject it into the ground through those beds. Okay, and that's become significant because when you re-inject water into the ground, you create a little mound, because the water gets mounded up as you add more water to it. And that when you have a mound, water flows downhill. Water flows in all directions off the mound. So some of it flows to the north, some of it flows to the east, to the west, to the south. So that's important to keep in mind as well. So I'm trying to paint a conceptual model in your minds as we move forward here, so you'll understand the complexity here. So what have we done since we last spoke? We've done a lot, and so on the groundwater side, first thing we did is to take that database that we had. We identified data gaps, and we recognized that there are areas where we needed to have additional data, additional monitoring wells to sample the wells, to sample the water, and to allow us to get groundwater elevation, so elevations help us figure out where the groundwater is flowing. Again, it's not hard. Groundwater flows downhill, so we want to know those elevations of water in those wells, so that tells us where the water is flowing. Then we looked at multi-level wells here. We installed levels, wells that are shallow, deep, and intermediate levels, so we can look at the distribution of the plume in 3 dimensions. And we have to do that because the plume is a 3-dimensional shape. And so in order for us to understand it, we have to look at it and generate the data that way. We instrumented the ponds and the wet areas at the site. is Cape Cod. Most of your ponds out there are what's called as kettle ponds. So their ponds were created when blocks of ice melted away, but now we've got groundwater, blocks of ice from the glaciation period, but now we've got groundwater flowing through those ponds. So in order for us to understand those ponds and how they interact with groundwater, we have to instrument them and take measurements again. So that's been done. We've developed a numerical groundwater flow model. That's a large model. What we did is we took the U.S. Geological Survey's Cape-wide model and we refined it for our area and brought in more site-specific data. And we're using that model to test what we think is going on to make sure that it all holds together mathematically and geologically. So that model is very much underway, and we're still tweaking it and refining it as new data comes in, but it's getting there. It's pretty much there. And then the other part that we spoke of is that we've been, assigning a team of very, experienced chemists working on trying to develop a forensic fingerprint of the data. Can we fingerprint what came out of your facility versus the plume that might have come out of the airport or other sources? So we've been looking at that as well. Unfortunately, what it's telling us is that there's been a lot of time that's gone by and those plumes have been intermingling so that the individual fingerprint isn't as clear as we'd like it to be. And I'm being upfront with you. The data is the data. So it's a data-driven thing, and that's what it's telling us right now. And we'll talk about that as we go through. The other part that we've done since, made good progress on is the ecological risk assessment. So we've collected samples of, not only the water in the ponds, but the sediments under the pond, the fish in the pond, the benthic invertebrate critters that live inside the sediments of the pond. We've collected samples of the bugs that fly over the ponds because those bugs get eaten up by birds and other animals in the area, so it's part of the food web. So we've done that. We used an outside firm called GHD to do that. GZA could have done it in-house, but honestly, we didn't have the resources to do it in the time frame that you needed. So we brought in an outside support firm to do it, and they've done a great job. They have completed their work, and we'll talk about that. Their work is very positive for you. And this is a summary of their work. They're working on their final report right now, but they've shared with us the summary. And so what they did is they looked at the various ponds, and the ponds are the site soils and the like, and the ponds are labeled there. And what they do is they look at sort of index or indicator animals that might be exposed here, and the list of those are down here. And then they look at the concentrations we detected in the bugs and in the fish samples. We actually collected fish and looked at fish in whole, and also looked at fish fillets. And the fillets were used to assess what a human might be exposed to if they ate the fillet of the fish. So we've got all that data. And what it tells us is that, we want to have a number that's less than 1 when you compare this. And overall, our numbers are very, very much less than 1. We have 2 slight exceedances here. And what they say is that they're under this no effects level. And what that means is we can't be certain that one animal of that population might not be impacted. But we are certain that as a population, the larger group of animals, we're not going to have a significant adverse effect to the population. So perhaps one animal, is adversely affected, but we're not going to significantly impact the whole population. So the MCP and the DEP allows us to look at it that way. And you have to also keep in mind, our exceedances are very, very slightly over 1. So what it means here is that this data is telling us that we don't have any significant risk on an ecological level. And again, the MCP is driven by reducing risk. So if there's no risk, that's a good thing. Okay. So that's a big finding. To refresh your memory on our site and our geology, I gave you the layout of the land. So this is a picture that looks at what the geology looks like here, going from Flint Rock Pond here, actually going northwest of Flint Rock Pond towards the Barnstable Fire District area here, through Flint Rock Pond, down your site towards Mary Dunn Pond. And if you take a knife and you cut through the soils, then this is a graphical representation of what you might see. And what you see, again, no surprises, you know the Cape well, you know the geology well, I'm sure. You have a lot of sand on the Cape. And what we see is, multiple layers of different types of sands, but all of it is very permeable sands. And then underneath that sand, we have a deposit of much less permeable sand, and that is silts and clays underlying all of that. And we tagged those silts and clays in our new wells, and we're able to confirm that the depth of those deposits. And that's a good thing for us, because those low permeable soils, silts and clays, act as a lower confining layer to the contaminants. Contaminants would much rather flow through the more permeable soils than the low permeable soils. And these blue lines that you're seeing here are depictions of the plume. So they're equal concentrations within the plume. And you can see the plume is heading, from our site here, here's the fire training facility, downwards towards Mary Dunn wells, and more specifically towards the Mary Dunn pumping wells. No surprise, our natural groundwater gradient goes from the northeast to the southeast. Northwest to the southeast. And that's what we're seeing here. The plume is moving in that direction. And here's a depiction of that, excuse me. Here's a depiction of that plume. And here's the plume in the shallow zone, and the next one I'll show you is in the deep zone. So here's your site here. Here's your site here. And you've got your plume that's migrating from your site and heading to the southeast towards the Mary Dunn ponds and towards the Mary Dunn wells. The data we have, not just for the PFAS plume, but also, if you recall, you had other plumes go through this site in the past. You had a chloroform plume go through it from the Cape Cod potato chip factory that went right from the Cape Cod potato chip factory up here and went right through your site, right into the Mary Dunn well. So that worked as a good tracer test for us, because we know under ambient flow where it's going to go. And then we had another plume that went through here from, it's called a perchlorate plume, that came from some flares that were stored at the site, and that went the same direction. And then you had petroleum that was released at the site when they used to burn fuel oil, and that went in the same direction. So when you have multiple lines of evidence all pointing in the same direction, that's a good thing for us. It gives us more certainty, and that's why I bring that up with you. So we know that your plume is heading in that direction, and we also know that it wants to go into the Mary Dunn wells and is going into the Mary Dunn wells. And that's why, as soon as it was detected in the Mary Dunn wells, you folks did the right thing by putting in wellhead treatment there, and that prevented those contaminants from getting into the public, or further getting into the public water supply system. You did the right thing, and that's helped out a lot. Okay. As we go further away from this, though, we've got other contaminants further to the south. And we've got contaminants here that's originating from the airport, and you know about that. And then we also see this, what we're dubbing this mystery plume here, as Paul pointed out, that the airport first noticed when they were doing their study, but never identified the source of it. And it's down here. And we don't know the source of it either. It could be from sources also at the airport, something maybe related to the runway or their historical activities. But it could also be, because we're down gradient of the wastewater treatment plant here, it could also be something related to the wastewater treatment plant. And I say that recognizing that, back before you put wellhead treatment here on the Mary Dunn wells, this impacted water was being distributed throughout your water distribution network, and all that water from people's homes, got discharged to the municipal sewer and made its way to the wastewater treatment plant, whereas it was re-injected through those little square-shaped re-injection ponds or basins there that I'm pointing to here. You can see those. So that's another potential avenue to get a plume into the wastewater treatment plant that might be contributing to this plume here. We don't know yet about that, and that's a big uncertainty there. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Here's the deeper and intermediate level water quality. Again, this is not two plumes. This is one plume, or this is one area, but the plumes are three-dimensional. So I showed you the shallow zone first, and now I'm showing you the deeper zone next. And you can see where you have your plume here, this going, in the deeper zone, migrating exactly what we said. But it seems to be, some amount seems to be getting a little bit beyond the Mary Dunn wells. And we're not sure if that's actively going there now, or if that's residual from what went on before. And we're trying to sort that out right now as well. But we think that anything that gets by here is minimal right now, because of the actions of the pumping of the Mary Dunn wells. They're actually functioning as great control for you in terms of containing the plume. And then down here, that mystery plume gets to be, more pronounced, as you go a little bit deeper. And again, this gets a little messy because, is this plume heading straight towards the Mara wells and through the airport? Is some of it also, I'll go back up, some of it also seems to be deflecting and going up towards either the airport well, when it's the Air One well, when it's running during the summer months, or up towards the Mary Dunn wells, because they're pumping, they're pulling water towards them, okay? So this is still uncertain right now, and we're looking at that as well. So to look at that, we are, we've been working with the airport. We have requested permission to sample a number of their old wells down here in, near the mystery well here, the mystery plume, I should say. And they've recently given us permission to sample these wells. These wells have been there for a long time, but they haven't been sampled in 10, 15 years. So we don't know what's there right now. And we'd like to sample those to see if we can glean any information there out of them as to what the source of this plume is, before we recommend any additional work from you. This is the easiest approach here. The airport agrees, so they've given us permission. We're going to be splitting samples. We're starting sampling next week, by the way. We're splitting samples with them, so they're going to collect some of their own samples. They're going to be testing some of their samples for sucralose. And sucralose is a synthetic sugar that a lot of us drink in diet products, and it's being used a lot as a tracer for wastewater discharges. So because it gets discharged through our natural sewage discharges, but it's not treated at the facilities through the normal wastewater treatment plant process. So it goes right through the plant, and if it's present, it may be and likely is an indicator that we've got some contribution from the wastewater treatment plant that's ending up over here as well. Okay. So we're going to be doing that. So between those two actions, we hope to have more information within the next month or two about what's going on with this mystery plume, what the source is, and where it's going, and what it consists of. Excuse me, it's dry in my office. So that's where we're going right now with this data. So we hope to have more. But the message I hope that to leave you with is that it's a complicated site. We've made a lot of progress to figure it out right now, but there's still some questions that remain to be answered. Now, the last thing I want to mention to you is that I mentioned that there's a potential for a contribution through the. I lost my cursor. Where'd it go? There's my cursor. Contribution through the wastewater treatment plant. But again, because that mound that I mentioned before, it's possible that some contribution from the PFAS from the Mary Dunn wells got released throughout the in all 360 degrees around that mound. The problem though is how would we ever track that down? Because that's going to be in a low concentration. And how do we separate that contribution from the other contributions in town that are all around town lots of other users, you know, and industries use PFAS and discharge PFAS to the municipal sewer. You know, things like metal fabricating, things like, you know, other chemical companies, or you know, there's lots of sources, including people's homes. If you launder, you know, clothing that's been treated with Scotchgard or other types of waterproofing, water treatment, you know, products, that will release PFAS constituents into your rinsate from your washing machines, and that rinsate goes right into the sewer system or into the septic system if you're on private. So the question then is, how would we ever separate out the contribution from your facility from the contribution from these countless other sources? And that's a difficult technical question to answer. For that reason, we've reached out to the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, and asked them to, you know, what they think and how should we proceed. And they agreed with us that this is not a decision that any one firm or any one site should answer. It's a policy or a decision that's going to impact the entire state. So they are evaluating it right now. We don't have an answer from them right now. They were on a recent call with us and told us that the word that keeps coming up during their conversations in-house, these are high-level in-house conversations, is infeasibility. And so we take that as the possible direction that it's infeasible for us to think that we're going to be able to track down the county's plume throughout the rest of the town here, everything that's downgrading to the wastewater treatment plant at this time, given that there's been so much time and so much intermingling and commingling of these different sources. So that's where we stand. It's an open-ended thing, but I wanted, you know, Paul and you know, and we wanted to let you know that this is an uncertainty, as he mentioned. Okay. And any questions about any of that up until this point? Okay.
Delegate Owen? Yeah, we've got a couple questions here.
Okay, great.
Delegate Owen?
Oh, thank you for that scientific explanation. It was way over my head.
I'm sorry.
No, but and I understand.
hope
but
it was
what
helpful,
I caught out
though.
of that is that the airport has a certain amount of responsibility for their plumes and whatever JetBlue, whatever happened over at the airport, they have some responsibility. Have they have a cost plan? Have they contributed to this incredible scientific journey that you're on, or are we the only responsible pay source?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is that because of the study you've done, you know, we've done together, we've identified a number of data gaps that include data gaps in their work. So with that, they have started to reopen their assessment because they were already in phase 5. They've started to reopen it. They've installed new wells recently. They've collected more samples recently. They're now talking about maybe putting in their own permeable reactive barrier like you did to further stabilize their plume. So that's all a good thing. And I think that they're doing it voluntarily. Is that helpful?
Somewhat. I really want to know, like, for example, you said that we put up the permeable barriers early on and stop some of this damage. If they're only doing it now, what about the damage that their side of it has caused? Do they have a plan to pay for that sort of thing and allocate whose fault there is to have these plumes in both directions, or maybe more than both directions, maybe from the wastewater plant? I mean, it sounds like we have admitted we've done some things and when we've done some work, but they seem to have not added to the ability to pay for these plumes over the course of decades.
I can't comment on that, but what I can tell you is that they are listed as a responsible party for their problem and their plumes. They've taken responsibility for that. They have executed the MCP following the guidance of their consultants at the time, and so they are doing their thing. We have done our thing. And what I want to make sure that I'm clear on is when I said that you did the right thing early on, that was in working with the town and the water district to put wellhead treatment on the Mary Dunn wells. Because what that means is you cut off the risk to the humans that are consuming that water. You did that early on, and that was a very good thing, because again, we're trying to remove risk, and one of the driving risks to humans here is ingestion of that water. So by putting on that wellhead treatment and co-paying for it with the or we're paying for it. I'm not even sure what percentage is being paid for, but by taking responsibility for that, you have helped to, or you have, cut off a major part of any risk to the humans that are consuming the water. Okay, you just put in the PRB this year, so it's been 10, 15 years before you put in the PRB. So, but I'm glad you did it now, because that is our strategy now, and I'm going to talk about that in my next slide. Is that your strategy now is to stabilize the site and contain it, so that the plume doesn't get any worse. Does that
Thank
help
you, Delegate
answer?
O'Malley. You've got a
Yes.
question there?
I do. This question is in terms of contributions. Do we know enough about the products that were used by the individual fire departments in their training exercises? Is it all the same material? Do they have different fingerprints? I hate to think about trying to point fingers, but we're on the hook here for some very big money. And if there are ways to spread some of this cost around,
Yeah.
do we
Yeah.
know enough? Is that data, is that available?
Yeah, I can share with you that we are trying to gain that information right now. We don't know it in detail right now. What we do know is that the county never bought any of it. The individual fire departments brought their own, or emergency responders brought their own. We don't have records of what they brought. We know that the airport says that they use a newer generation material that has this 6,2 fluorotelmer product in it. And I'm sure they did, but we don't have and we're still working with the airport to sort out, is it possible that maybe they use other products or not? They don't think they did, but, we're still evaluating that. And the other thing we're learning is that, there are no real records of what was used at your site and how it was used, when it, it was all kind of loose. And so, we are, working with your folks to maybe to glean whatever we can out of information. We got a treasure of old photos recently. We've scanned those, and they don't provide a lot of information in terms of what product, but they do share some information over, whose fire trucks are on site and things like that. So that's the next phase of this, what I would consider the work that you're doing right now. Right now, we're looking at the plume. Where is it going? How do we cut it off? How do we make sure things don't get worse? And then the rest of it is the cost thing, and that's another total strategy. But that I can share that we are working with your folks, and hope to be able to continue to support you in that way.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Any other questions here? Delegate Green?
Okay.
Thank you. I'm curious. I know this is probably very simplistic, and just from what I'm gleaning from what you were talking about, you were talking about where the plume is at various levels, and it seems like what you're saying is the plume is at the top level of the cross section of the land there. The wells themselves, I mean, is there perhaps a recommendation that the wells just go deeper so that they avoid the plume? Is that something that, I mean, it's very simplistic, but am I understanding this correctly, or?
You mean the drinking water wells?
Yes.
Yeah, the problem there is that you're gonna, if you go deeper, you're gonna get out of that nice permeable sandy material that's easy to pump a lot of water from, and you get into a low permeable silty material that doesn't want to yield a lot of water. So you wouldn't have the same production rates, and that's the problem. So that's why it's really not feasible to go deeper.
Thank you.
Okay.
But
But you can
thank-
see why we drilled our wells a little bit deeper so we could span the entire thickness of the sand and assess that.
thank you, Mr. Packman. I had a quick question, if you wouldn't mind switching back to that Hyannis slide you had, with the, one more down,
This one?
one more. That
This
last
one.
one you had up. Yep. Just trying to understand what we're looking at here. I'm seeing a plume that looks like it's covering most of this chunk of Hyannis. And then I'm seeing a lot of question marks along the left and then along the south.
That's right.
Am I interpreting correctly in that there's PFAS permeating from unknown sources throughout this part of northern Hyannis? And to some extent, at a certain point in time, PFAS was detected in those wells, drinking wells, near the Fire Training Academy. And then folks looked upstream from the Fire Training Academy, saw upstream from those wells, saw the Fire Training Academy and said that's the culprit. Whereas actually there's PFAS permeating the entire region. And now we're kind of holding the bag, cleaning up that area because we were directly upstream from those wells. Is there a possibility that a lot of the PFAS had already existed, and obviously contributed to by the Fire Training Academy, but that we're essentially cleaning up a mess that's much bigger than anything we might have created? And that might be a question for Mr. Rosala as well.
It could be a combination answer for myself and John, but one thing that we know is that there's different parameters you can test for PFAS, and our site in particular, we knew, knowing the history, foam was heavily used there. So in the initial, you can almost see in the plume map, there's a darker shade of blue. It's hard to see in the legend, but in that plume, there's a darker, medium color, and then a lighter shade. The darker shade in our situation almost represents where that plume, the core of that particular plume originated from. Now, if you go to the left of our site where there's question marks, that's actually in the Barnstable Fire District land. That's a lighter colored plume. That's showing from what I understand, John can clarify, potentially a different plume influencing us, but it's at a much lower concentration. So our plume is concentrated. We know there definitely was a plume from our site. Same thing as the airport in their lower section has identified there's a plume in theirs. It's really hard to represent it in just one slide or one picture, but there's a lot of different things going on. There's also PFAS as a background pretty much across the board everywhere in New England, probably in many places around the world. We talked about a study referenced by a consultant. Everywhere they went on peaks of mountains and things like that, they took samples, they tested the sample, and it came back for positive for PFAS. But the key is the concentrations, and for just a perspective, the Massachusetts drinking water standard for PFAS is 20 parts per trillion of PFAS. That light blue section, and John can maybe, if you want to overview, John, what does the light blue represent as far as a number? I don't want to misspeak the number, but our site, we had thousands of parts per trillion. So we had a really concentrated hotspot, we called it. And so there's different levels of how hot the PFAS is, and requirements for how you remediate it. And there's thresholds as far as concentrations in the groundwater in the soil.
That's like 100. That's like 100. So the question marks indicate where we lack data. So there's uncertainty there. And again, the question marks are, as Paul pointed out, are up here towards the Barnstable Fire District wells here. We installed some wells, new wells, and based on those data, and more importantly, based on the groundwater flow directions and those elevations that I mentioned earlier, it tells us, and our model supports this. It tells us that we don't think that our plume over here made it all the way back here, because that's going uphill, up gradient. So you can't push the contaminated groundwater up gradient. It doesn't work that way unless you have some other force acting on it, like a pumping well or something that's actively pulling it back. And yes, we have the fire district wells here, and that's what we first looked at. But when you look at the gradients overall and you look at what's here, we don't see how you can get our stuff here all the way past the fire district, the Barnstable Fire District wells, as well as all the way out here. It just doesn't happen. Okay, so we concluded that the source of whatever's up here that's up gradient of us because our gradient, our groundwater flow direction, again, is from the northwest here down towards the southeast. And it's pretty consistent. Again, it's Cape Cod. And what we conclude is that this source is probably coming from something up here. Okay, we don't know it yet, and that's something, you know, we've started to develop some data we requested and analyzed through the street records, the property tax records and things like that, to see who's operating out here and look to see how many sites we're operating that might be users of PFAS, and we've developed a plan of that. So we're working on that as well. What we're trying to do is, you know, build multiple lines of evidence to support you here, and it's coming together that we don't think you're the source here. This is another source. Same down here. You know, we don't have a lot of data here, and that's why it's showing it with question marks. And you can also see the coloration going from the darkest part, which is heavier concentration, higher concentration, to the lighter part, which is lower concentration. So we're hoping that after we sample all these wells that haven't been sampled in a long time, the water pollution control facility has been fantastic. They have given us full access to their wells, so we're sampling their wells as well. And again, they have a lot of wells, but they don't test for PFAS routinely because they don't treat for PFAS. They're treating to remove pathogens and biological bacteria, things like that, and nutrient loading. They're not trying to get rid of PFAS constituents. So they don't have a lot of data there. We have, you know, we did sample one of their wells recently, and it had low levels of PFAS in it. So we're planning to sample more of their wells starting next week, and we're hoping that the new batch of data for the wastewater treatment plant wells and all these other wells, you can see all these dots, as well as some other additional wells that were installed by the fire district, you know, should give us more information of what the actual shape of this mystery plume is. And hopefully that, combined with the historical data, will tell us how it's behaving. And that historical behavior might also give us some clues as to whether or not it's a plume that looks like it's coming from a constant source, or if it's coming from a source that was cut off at some point in time, i.e. when you put wellhead treatment on the Mary Dunn wells, that would have cut off the source coming from the discharge from the wastewater treatment plant. Does that make sense?
It does. And Mr. Pagan, you said you still have a little more of your presentation to go?
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley, Delegate Green, how do we feel about finishing out the presentation, see if those questions get answered, and then asking more at the end? Awesome. If you don't mind continuing the presentation. Sorry, Delegate O'Malley.
I would say the question I have right now is very immediate to what he just talked about. And it's this, and this has got nothing to do with liability. Are there discussions ongoing with the town of Barnstable and its water pollution control facility to do treatment right then? So we're not re-injecting PFAS contaminated water back into the groundwater. I mean, we're treating it as we pull it out. Why couldn't it be treated as it goes back in?
Well, it's a very costly treatment. Yeah, so I'm not part of that discussion. I can't comment on that other than tell you I'm not part of it.
Not part of it. Okay, thank you.
And the good part, and I'll remind you, is that, you know, the good part is because you put on all this wellhead treatment on all the wells now, the Mary Dunn wells are all have wellhead treatment. Okay, so whatever is being discharged into the distribution system is treated water. So that's clean, you know, clean water. Same thing goes for the airport well. Same thing goes for the Mar wells. Those are all treated now. So so the source has been cut off. So, you know, you shouldn't be or discharging anything through the wastewater treatment plant anymore.
Good. Okay, so that is risk reduction. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So the rest is very quick. Okay. We want to give you an update on the permeable reactive barrier, and again, the barrier is such that it is combined with the cap that you did a few years ago. The cap, as Paul pointed out, the cap prevents fresh rainwater from going through the dirty soils and creating more contaminated water. Okay, and then what we want to do is put in what we did is put in a permeable reactive barrier, which is like a cutoff curtain of carbon enriched soils. So we injected a very fine carbon powder injected as a slurry into the ground from the top of that silt all the way up to the water table. And the early data is very, very positive. So this photo shows what, that the process of doing that. So you can see there's a small drill rig here that drills a probe to the base of the sands. And then the carbon product is brought in on these totes. These totes are concentrated. So we have to dilute that down to the concentration of carbon that we want. We did that by diluting it with treated water from the Hyannis Water District. This machine right here is basically a mixing device. Okay, so it dilutes the carbon down to the right concentration, and then we pump it down the hole through the drill rig again, and we do that over and over and over again. And when you do that, you put in lots of the probes, and your alignment goes right down the fence line here, all the way to almost into Flint Rock Pond. Overall, we did that 247 different times to inject the carbon at your site, and it's a long alignment, 600 feet. You can here's some specs, and the big thing is we injected 600,000 gallons of product, which is the equivalent of 400,000 pounds of carbon. That's a lot of product. Okay, and the idea there is that between the cap that's on top of this, now again, the cap prevents it from coming in vertically. The barrier prevents it, contains it horizontally, laterally. Okay, and it's along the down gradient side. So again, groundwater is flowing from northwest to southeast, so it's on the down gradient side, catching and treating and containing any PFAS that's leaving your facility. So if we contain it here, then the concentrations on the down gradient or the eastern side of the barrier should go down with time relatively quickly, because we're cutting off the source. And it's relatively quickly because we're in such high permeable soils. That groundwater is flowing very quickly through those soils. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's some results for the PRB. The pilot test was very favorable. Here's where we started out at about 4,500 parts per trillion, and we injected. And our next sample was down here, and we were almost at non-detectable levels right after injecting. Okay, and they've stayed there. So our pilot test results are very, very good, and we have no reason to believe that the full scale won't be similar. And the full scale was done between July and October. We also had to install some additional performance verification wells on the down gradient side of the area. So I'll go back to this. And so, each of these dark colored circles here, I'm colorblind, so I won't even guess to say what color it is. It's just dark to me. But each of those were another series of wells that we installed, so we'd have adequate monitoring of the performance of that system. Okay, the DEP is very pleased with what we did, how we did it, so far the data is looking very, very good. So here's an update on other work that we've done. I won't spend a lot of time on this. I'm sure you know about the vandalism to the site. That's been repaired. The existing groundwater extraction well is back online and functioning very well. Our flow rates are probably as close to as high as they've ever been. And that's as expected. Now that those lines are all clean, we jet clean those lines. They had not been cleaned in I think 10 or 15 years, and you can imagine they were very dirty. So they've all been cleaned. It was a big job to clean them because we had to expose them. They weren't built with cleanouts, so we had to open them up and install cleanouts and things like that. But that's done, and that's working. The big thing I want to leave you with is this last bullet. And that is that now that we put in that PRB, where we want to assess whether or not you have to continue to run this groundwater containment system, because I don't think at the end of the day, now that the PRB is in, I don't think it's going to do much for you other than spend your money. So and we've had preliminary conversations with the DEP about that. And those conversations have gone well as well. So the idea is once we know that the PRB is working as designed, to start an assessment with the DEP as to whether or not we can, it makes sense to continue to run that pump and treat system or shut it down and use that money for better things. And I think that will go well, as that the outcome of that will be positive for you as well. Okay. So that's our strategy on that. So other things moving forward, and this is my last slide, what are we doing the next year? As Paul mentioned, the first thing is to complete the phase 2, which is the comprehensive site assessment. And the big question there is, what is the extent of the disposal site boundary? And we won't be able to answer that until we know better about what the source of that mystery plume is. Is it from you folks, or is it from someone else? And we hope to have more data on that soon. We also won't know whether or not we have to track down those other, or the potential for some other release or PFAS impacts through that mound from the wastewater treatment plant or not. And so hopefully the DEP agrees with us and says it's infeasible for us to do that. And so you don't have to be starting out over again and doing a town-wide study over trying to separate out your contribution to any background levels of PFAS versus everyone else's, which I think is truly going to be infeasible. At the end of the day, you're going to spend a lot of money, and we may have more likely than not, we're going to have an inconclusive study, which I don't think helps anyone. Okay, so that's where the conversations are going right now with the DEP, but I wanted to let you know that. Okay, so that brings up, the questions about, how do we, when and how do we finish the phase 2 is up in the air right now. We spoke about the ecological risk assessment being very positive. Human risk, health risk is also looking very positive. Right now, the data we are showing is that because of the work that you did to put in that wellhead treatment, that cut off the exposure to humans, so that eliminates the majority of the risks to the human health population. The risk that we are seeing that may exist and likely exist is in consumption of the fish in Flint Rock Pond and maybe Mary Dunn Pond. So that's an easy one to deal with. Don't, maybe you put some kind of control that says, don't eat the fish from these ponds. That seems like a prudent thing to do no matter what. If it's not for PFAS, you all know about mercury in fish and things like that. So it's probably prudent to not eat freshwater fish at a PFAS site. So that's where that's going. But overall, it's a very positive result on the human health risk as well. Other things we talked about, finishing up the pilot test with just one more round of sampling and writing it up and getting the DEP to agree on that it was positive. That should not be a problem. And then, doing the phase 3 that Paul spoke of, which is identifying remedial alternatives. That should be easy because we already know what our recommended remedial alternatives are. Exactly what you just did by putting in the PRB, maintaining it, improving it in 10, 15, 20 years. If we need to re-inject some more carbon where we might have some breakthrough, go in and re-inject it, that kind of thing. So that the phase 3 should be pretty straightforward. And same thing with phase 4. It's going to say we're going to implement a remedial design that you're already doing. So all that's a very positive thing. And that's where I am. That's where we are right now. And any other questions that I can answer or clarify?
Yes, Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Quick question. You
Yes.
talk about 20 parts per trillion is what the state level is of acceptable, right? What's the standard, like gray water from my house? How many, between using, treated clothing and nonstick cookware, what's the regular sort of parts per trillion that a normal human being puts into the water?
I don't have that number in front of me, and that's a good question, but we haven't zeroed in on that. I don't know that number exists right now. That would be a significant research, data gathering effort and to look at what's normal. But
Doug,
we
you agree?
know that, we have anecdotal data from, colleagues and other studies that says that wherever they test, they seem to find these products because they've been
Thank you, Mr.
using
Baggett.
so many different products over the years.
Delegate Green?
Thank you. So, I'm concerned about where Delegate Oman was going as well. I mean, I commend the county for taking action steps, and definitely the Fire Training Academy did contribute to this issue, but and the county has hired the consultant, and the consultant has done really great work, but the consultant is giving all this information that is also helping all these other entities in this area. And, what about spreading the wealth a little bit? I mean, or having the state pick up the tab a little bit here. I mean, the county is bearing the brunt of all of this, all the time, the energy, the staff time, and certainly the cost of the consultant, who is giving us really great information and fingers crossed, hopeful news. Is there any plans to spread the wealth a little bit?
And I'll clarify that quickly in that for the MCP, we're required to delineate our plume. So in certain circumstances, as John mentioned, these mystery areas, we need to determine what is ours and what is not ours. So some other groups in the area are benefiting from our work, but we've also benefited from some work, that the airport has done and others have done. As far as long-term, we're really looking closely at the site as far as how to financially manage it, and how we proceed in the future. We know that public funds are somewhat limited, or if we need to ask for public funds, we need to make sure we have a very detailed request and backing up the reason why. So we're trying to manage the site. That's one of the reasons why we brought GZA on, is how do we cost effectively reduce the risk so there's no risk to the consumer. So right now, if you're drinking water in that area, it's treated with carbon, so you're drinking essentially water that meets the drinking water supply. Concerned about the ecological risk, that's been a question that's come up then and there. And then with that being known, how do we take the site as far as we can with the funds that we have available? Where in the past it's been thrown out, well, can we handle the site like a Joint Base Cape Cod and just pump and treat all over the place? Well, you could, but if you did the financial model on that, you'd be in the hundreds upon hundreds of millions. So that's why we've been struggling and going back and forth with GZ. How do we best manage everything from what we know is coming? Maybe down the road we request more, and maybe there's some funds available. Maybe it's through the states. Maybe there's other alternatives that we can come up with. So we're right now, the PRB was, I think, really critical to get in that it contained our site. We're managing it. It'll reduce our settlement payments to the Hyannis water down the road because we'll have less PFAS get to that point. And then from there, we're well aware of the cost we've spent to date, upwards of 10 million, tracking the cost. And then what point do we try to recover those costs? One, for example, is the manufacturer lawsuit for property damage. That might only bring us so far, but there'll be, I think, a lot of further discussion in the future as far as how we manage the site.
Yeah, that's my point. The precautionary principle should be coming into play more frequently as far as large corporations are concerned. Thank you.
Delegate Oman?
Thank you for that presentation and that update you just gave. This is more for you, Mr. Rosala. The last bullet point from the gentleman, Mr. Backwin, was phase 4 remedial implementation. That feeds back to your first presentation, which phase 4 said something to the tune of from $0 to $60 million. Those are things that could keep anybody up late at night, and anybody that's due to the finance committee and on the assembly, I'm one of them. That can you get any kind of real connection to those two numbers? The 60 million is impossible. So I want to know where that 60 million came from and how that relates to Mr. Backwin's last bullet point.
Yeah, so it's a never ending, balancing act, and what do you include and what would be too premature, as far as maybe to finalize a number. So I really wanted to have, the best information that we have at a time. So as John mentioned, the phase 2 is still evolving. There's still some concern if this phase 2 takes a turn for the worse, for us, and say we do have to delineate more and we do have to expand that remediation number could expand exponentially. That's why we kept that 60 million in. In the short term, we've done cost benefit or life cycle cost for the site, trying to understand, how do we best handle, like we mentioned, the risk, the public health issue. If we can have that under control, then, how do we minimize spending funds on the site, where the PRB would be one, as John mentioned, would be discontinuing the use of, potentially the use of the pump and treat system, where right now we're spending roughly $400,000 a year on that. So all these factors are kind of in the air floating, but we hope in the end that it would be much less than the 60 million. Just formally, it's dangerous territory to go say, okay, we know it's going to be, say, less than 10, or we're almost at the point where we're comfortable where we need to be. So it's a balancing point. I hope we can manage the site to be much less than 60 million. John, I don't know if you wanted to add on.
Yeah, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I'll comment that we weren't involved with the $60 million number. That came before us. But my understanding of it is that it assumed that the remedial strategy for the site would be long-term pump and treat, or what I would call groundwater extraction and treatment. And I must say that in most cases, groundwater extraction and treatment, or pump and treat, is a very inefficient method. And it's one that once you start it, you're probably going to be doing it forever. And oftentimes you end up incurring costs that are not even related to the original contaminant that you're dealing with. And for example, in New England here, when you're we're pumping groundwater, we have naturally occurring high levels of iron and other metals. And that iron, as soon as you start pumping it, you change the chemistry of the water, and the iron wants to precipitate out. It happens everywhere. It actually happens all over the country, but it really happens a lot here in New England. And it happens at your site. And that's why we had to jet clean out those lines recently, because I said after 15 years, they were pretty well clogged. They weren't clogged with PFAS. They were clogged with iron. Okay. And that iron is naturally occurring, but that ends up creating a cost item that is very significant. So that's why we did not recommend long-term pump and treat here for this site, because it was likely to be a very costly approach that would last forever. And so we recommended that you take a different approach with the PRB, which is not trying to remove all the mass from the ground, but to stabilize it so that it's not migrating away and it's not impacting anyone. Because again, the MCP is risk driven. Remove the risks, not necessarily remove the contaminants, just remove the risk. So that's why I think that overall, the cost for this site should be less than 60 million. And following this
Great news.
new approach, which
We
is
appreciate it.
containment.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want one follow-up. And also I noticed in your very thorough presentation that the airport side of this, they've already jumped to phase 5. That sounds to me like a shortcut that we can't take. And I was wondering if it was reasonable to ask why they did it so quickly.
Mr. Rizal?
I can speak to it, and enough, John, maybe from the LSP point of view, might, again, they delineated the extent and nature of their plume as they saw with the data. As more data became, available, they decided it was worth, at any point in your, from what I understand, in your MCP, history of your site, you can go back and revisit. So more data came forward. They decided it would be prudent for us to do some additional work. Take that for what you.
I have nothing to add beyond that. That's exactly what my answer would be.
Any other questions here? All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Packin, and Mr. Rizal, I think you have another presentation.
Yes, thank you all. And for this, or presentation is more of a discussion, and we won't go on, all night. I'm sensitive to
Okay,
time.
sorry
but,
if I took too much of your time. I hope it was helpful.
No,
though.
no
I'm
worries
gonna
at all.
log off.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's super helpful and we really appreciate your work.
Thank you. Have a good night.
But similar to our PFAS site, there's some, there's many moving parts to our space planning and envisioning for the site. So again, it's a balancing act where in some ways I would love to just throw it out there, all out there and say, here's everything we're looking at, but you need to be controlled as far as what information we provide. But as far as working with Michael, we want to be aware of every option that's out there, and then obviously look at the cost benefit for it. So if we're going to make a recommendation to maybe renovate a room or a basement, we're looking at that number versus the cost to build new versus leasing versus all these other logistic factors. So we're in the process of compiling information in a vision, and at some point we'll be preparing more of a memo, and it'll have some we're trying to have a very abridged. I mean, the master plan was a very detailed document, but having something that people can understand. Okay, here's the vision, here's the thoughts, and why. So for example, we've Gensler through their project identified on as far as the best needs for the county down the road would be to build a new building, adequately sized. The issue with that, you could be in the $60 to $70 million range. We're all aware that one huge variable is the courts to begin with. Depending how we handle that variable, maybe you could free up money for some for some renovations in the future. But right now, the way our lease is written and our debt we have to the court, we have a lot of potential commitments to those projects. So I think as Michael further discusses our capital plan, that shows a good snapshot as far as the vision for the next few years and how we handle everything. And as things evolve, variables change, our the space needs or the vision could change as far as what we have for funds available. So for right now, we're looking, we know we have, even prior to the master plan being started, we have immediate space needs for staff. So we have a finance group that's split apart. We have our cooperative extension, who is in a leased property, which isn't a bad location, but again, it's potentially money going out the door to a lease that might be better, maybe dedicated toward a more permanent structure here. So the immediate needs would be the Superior Courthouse project. Once that project starts, and again, we're working with the courts, we're ready to go with the design essentially, but we need them to make a commitment as far as space. We're looking at a temporary office space on site here, but we need an actual, a number to commit to so we can cost estimate, what those provisions would be. So we're getting very close. We've had countless meetings with them trying to work through all the details. It's actually overwhelming the amount of details they have to worry about as as far as law and how you can, stage different trials and courts and requirements. But we're getting there, and we've had, anywhere from a core group of maybe 8 to 10 people to, 30 others on the peripheral. So there's a lot of moving parts in it. We're getting there. We're looking right now at either late spring or summer start, but we're getting to the point as each week goes by, we're going to start having to kick back our schedule. We need a bid period for our work to a contractor, and that has to be a 2-month window, and we have a 1-month contract and award period. So no matter how quick we are with it, we're still just tied to those numbers. So we're torn. Also, we ideally would love to go from spring to fall for a construction period. If we start in the fall, we're going to be going through the winter. Certain work can't occur during the winter, or if it were to occur, we might have to have additional provisions as far as climate control for the mortar work. So that's kind of a fluid situation. We're all up in the air. Again, we're in, I think, a good spot, but where it ties into space needs is once we start that work, we're going to displace some county staff. So how do we get through that temporarily? I mean, one situation is some hybrid work. Some staff needs to be, in the office day to day. We have, our accounting group that prints checks and things like that. You need an actual place to work. Some people, if you're in your probationary period, we have to have a place for the group to work. So as Michael introduced, we talked about trying to leverage the space that we have and really look at efficiencies where the Deeds basement isn't essentially an underutilized space right now. If we looked at that, we did some sketch ups as far as how we can optimize that use. That would be a great swing space for us, with to use in the short term. Another variable coming in is that the Open Cape building is owned by the sheriff. sheriff has a space on Main Street. They want to get their staff from Main Street up into the third floor of the Open Cape, which is where our IT group happens to be. That could be, happening in the next, 3, 4, 5 months. We haven't, at that point, IT is displaced, so we need a spot for them. So there's all these variables, long term, okay, we'd love to have the building or purchase an existing building or lease space, but short term, we need to make all these little puzzle pieces move for the time being. Same thing we were looking at. How do we optimize our Superior Courthouse presence once we get back in there? If we're going to be vacating that space, can Don's group go through, do some work, maybe get all the finance group in there together? We could revisit sections of the old jail, not doing an all-out renovation, but how can we get staff to fit in there more effectively? With that all being said, that's your short-term, 1, 3, 5, 7-year approach. Then what we really need to, I guess clearly iterate down the road is, okay, if we did an improvement to the old jail renovation, really it's the cost per square foot renovations is almost the same to build new. So we need, we're working on, a memo or a succinct outline of how this whole transition is going to work. And there's multiple pieces, and it's as we think we have a solution for one, another piece comes forward. So it's an evolving process. That's where we're at right now. We hope to have something, as far as, timeline, Michael, I mean, through this winter into spring, really trying to nail down our approach and vision as far as recommendations or scenarios. And, you draw how many scenarios do you present? Is it 1, 2, 5? So we're in the middle of it right now, but, a lot of potential exciting projects coming forward, and, looking forward to discussing in more detail with you.
Definitely. Thank you. Any questions right now on this preliminary report?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And this is why, Michael, Administrator Dutton might need to comment as well, because I got a little confused this morning. So, first of all, something that came up just now was, if the sheriff wants to move their people from Main Street to this, could we use their Main Street space?
I think that the sheriff leases the Main Street space, so the lease presumably is coming up, and so she's let me know that that she would like us to vacate her space, the sheriff's own space, so that she can, drop the lease. She's doing the same thing we're trying to do. We're many years out, but she now, as we all know, has space on this campus that is still controlled by the sheriff's office. So understandable that she'd want to use her space instead of spend money to rent space.
That makes sense. And then the other thing, I got confused this morning because talking about on the upcoming capital plan is going to be redoing the finance department work, which we had said that we didn't want to pay for until the study was done. So the study's done, and we said, the minute it's done, if you need it done, come to us, we'll give you the money, which you didn't do yet. But now we've got this. So I'm wondering, we wouldn't have been able to do that work anyway yet, would we? Because now that's going to be a whole part of the Superior Court work. I'm confused.
So the Superior Court project has been in the works for a while, and it encompasses, for the most part, only the exterior upgrade to the building, with the exception of foundational support inside the building needs to be repointed. But otherwise, no interior work on that building is anticipated in that project. So we're looking now as one of the recommendations that Gensler's made, and we'll bring that forward, when we begin to talk about the ordinance that's coming your way. One of their recommendations was to renovate that space. I don't want to, quite honestly, put a lot of money into that space, but it does need some reconfiguration in order to accommodate the folks that we've got working off-site. So we're trying to get everybody, that works in finance and under Carol's purview into one space. And I think there's tremendous value to that. So we're anticipating spending a little bit of money that the assembly's already appropriated for, to get the roof, not the roof, the ceiling done, because there's some particulate that's not particularly healthy coming out of that. And then hopefully use the time period when when we all have to vacate that building in order to do a limited amount of that interior work that will be able to accommodate all the people that Carol needs in that sort of one space.
Right, so then why isn't that included in this?
It is. Oh, I'm sorry. What are you looking at?
In our, is it, it's not, doesn't really seem to be included in the supplemental that we're voting on today.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's not that supplemental. It's included in the capital plan that's coming your way next meeting.
Right, so I'm just wondering why it's not in today's capital plan, because we want to get working on that immediately, right? Don't we?
No, we can't work on that until we all vacate the building. So as Paul mentioned, that's probably, now we're looking at sort of summer at this point. So we have a little bit of time there. The timing issue for the supplemental you see in front of you is we are under the gun to create the space so that we can move all of our folks and IT into either temporary/permanent space, depending on who you are. And that's the urgency, so that we can have that space prepared so that when summer comes or late spring comes and we have to move people out of the Superior Court, we have a place for them to go.
Thank you, now it makes sense.
And just to clarify, Delegate Harder, that ordinance you're referring to is on for a public hearing today, but we're not voting on it today. Any other questions? Cool. With that, thank you very much. Now the assembly convenes, and there's nothing on the agenda. So reports, officers of committees, none there, no orders of the day, no new business. With that, for announcements, Mr. Clerk, anything from you?
We'll be getting in touch with you tomorrow about possible committee meetings on both the 8th and the 10th. So we're looking at a potential finance committee meeting, potential public services committee meeting, and we've already told the public that we're having an economic affairs committee meeting on the 10th. So I'll be in touch tomorrow trying to find quorum and times for those meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And on the topic of that Economic Affairs Committee meeting on the 10th, the speaker asked me to just give folks a heads up that some piece of information that we were looking for for the transfer fee conversation that's being had there regarding revenues, costs, and so forth are going to be brought up there. So delegates not on the committee that were also interested in that conversation can tune in. And otherwise, for my own editorializing, delegates received today communications from the drafting group to the Economic Affairs Committee, but everyone was CC'd on it regarding the draft ordinance or the draft home rule petition that's going to be on the agenda for the Economic Affairs Committee meeting. That way, if delegates want to share it with their communities, obviously this has been a topic of a lot of public engagement up until now. And this should at least answer questions that folks have about not where the assembly is going to end up, but where we are at the moment. So if delegates want to share that information, that draft, it's the draft that the Economic Affairs Committee is going to be considering. It's not yet a home rule petition filed in front of the full assembly. And with that, I will look for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
May I ask for clarification? Letters went out to the towns, and I believe there was information about the updates. What we received today, is that an additional update to what we've already received?
Yes, Delegate Green. In the letter that went out to the towns, they were told that by the 10th, there was going to be a draft petition ready to be considered by the committee. And this indeed is that draft petition that the committee will be considering.
Thanks for the clarification.
Of course. Anything else? With that, motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Let's get a roll call vote.
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizel, Delegate Fuller. Yes. Delegate Gallagher.
Yes.
Delegate Green.
Yes.
Delegate Harder.
Yes.
Delegate Killian.
Yes.
Delegate King,
Yes.
Dean Noman.
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes,
Delegate Sampson, Delegate Ty, Speaker Warner.
Yes.
Delegate Wyman Colombo, Deputy Speaker Gasson.
Yes.
That's everybody.